Her hands would not stop shaking, and the worst part was that she had known. Somewhere underneath 2 years of pretending, she had always known this envelope would come. The card was heavier than paper had any right to be. Gold edges. Raised lettering. The kind of expensive that was built to make you feel small before you even read the words. And the words, when she finally let herself read them, did exactly that. David Okonma. Grace Adele. Together with their families. Request the honor of your presence. Her own name was handwritten at the bottom in ink. Not printed. Handwritten. So she would understand that this was personal. So she would understand that she had been chosen, specifically, to sit in a beautiful room and watch the man who threw her away marry someone better. She read it 4 times. Her pulse climbed to something like 110, and she actually noticed the number, the way you notice a smoke alarm going off in someone else's apartment, distant and yet somehow your problem. She should have thrown it away. Any sane woman would have thrown it away, poured a glass of wine, and let David Okonma marry his perfect Grace in peace. But sane women did not do what Naomi had done 2 years ago. Sane women did not walk into the most dangerous organization in the city and ask for a job, smiling, when the whole reason they came was buried so deep even they were afraid to look at it directly. David did not know that. David thought she had crawled away broken. He thought this invitation was a knife. He had no idea whose house she had been living inside for 2 years. He had no idea who signed her paychecks now. Her younger sister came through the door without knocking, the way she always did, and stopped dead when she saw Naomi's face. Zuri Bello did not need to ask. She crossed the room, took the card, read it, and her jaw went tight and dangerous. "You're not going." It was not a question. It was Zuri drawing a line in the ground with her whole body. Naomi did not answer. She was looking at the window, at the rain, at nothing. "Naomi. Look at me. After everything he did to us, to Dad, you are not going to sit in that room and let him parade her in front of you. I have to go. You do not have to do anything." But that was the lie they had both agreed to believe for 2 years, and Naomi was so tired of it. "There's something I never told you," Naomi said, and her voice came out so steady it frightened her. "About where I work. About who I work for." Zuri went very still. "The invitation isn't the dangerous part, Zuri. The dangerous part is that David has no idea who's going to walk in beside me." Her sister's hands tightened. "Naomi. Naomi, what did you do?" And the rain kept coming down, and Naomi realized she was finally, after 2 years, about to say his name out loud. But she didn't. Not yet. Some doors, once opened, do not close. Across the city, on a floor most people would never be allowed to reach, Lee Junho already knew about the wedding. He knew things before they were spoken. It was the reason men feared him and the reason no one had ever once beaten him. He held a glass he was not drinking and looked out at a skyline he owned pieces of, and on the black desk behind him lay a photograph he had been staring at for far too long. The man in the photograph was David Okonma. Junho had been waiting 3 years for a reason to stand in the same room as him, because David did not belong to himself. David belonged to Master Ro Guangsuk, the one enemy Junho had never been able to reach, the old man who kept his people behind glass and lawyers and other people's weddings. And now Ro's favorite dog was getting married, and half the people who mattered in this city would be under one roof to watch. Then his assistant told him something that changed the temperature of the room. One of his own people had received an invitation. Handwritten. A woman named Naomi Bello. He set the glass down. Naomi Bello. The quiet one. The one who did her work perfectly and asked for nothing and looked at no one too long. He had assumed she had no history. He had assumed wrong, and Junho did not enjoy assuming wrong. He pulled her file himself. And what he found underneath the quiet made him go very still, because it turned out the woman who worked in his house had walked into it carrying the exact same enemy he did. She had never told him. That, more than anything, was what made him decide. He would take her to the wedding himself. He did not do it to be kind. Junho was not a kind man, and he would have been the first to say so. He did it because walking into Rose's carefully arranged evening with the woman David had discarded on his arm was the single most precise insult he could deliver without firing a shot. It told David that his past now belonged to his enemy. It told Rose that Junho could reach into his event and rearrange it just by choosing who stood beside him. Naomi was not a rescue. She was a message. At least, that was what he told himself in that office, before the night made a liar of him. When he told her, Naomi forgot how to breathe for a second. She had spent 2 years keeping her distance from this man, keeping her voice level, keeping her secret sealed. And now he was standing there telling her he knew. Not all of it. But enough. You should have told me we shared an enemy, he said. Not angry. Worse than angry. Interested. It wasn't your problem, she managed. Everything under my roof is my problem. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to thin. You're going to that wedding. And you're not going alone. She wanted to say no. She should have said no. Instead she felt something she had refused to feel for 2 years, the pull of standing close to the one man in the world who was more dangerous than her grief, and she hated how much of her wanted to lean into it. This was the trap she had built for David. She had not once considered that the trap might close around her too. The car smelled of leather and his cologne and her own nerves. She sat with her spine straight and her hands folded, in a deep emerald gown that had cost more than her rent, and she did not look at him. He looked at her. You're afraid, he observed. I'm focused. You're both. A pause that was not empty. When we walk in, you don't shrink. Whatever he did to you, tonight he watches you arrive on my arm and understands he lost you to something he can't touch. Understand? She understood. God help her, a part of her had waited 2 years to hear it. His hand rested on the seat between them. Not touching her. Just close enough that she was aware of every inch of the distance, and aware that he had left it there on purpose. The city slid past in gold streaks. Somewhere ahead, David was fixing his cufflinks and rehearsing his vows, and he had no idea the night was already his. And if your chest is tightening right now the way hers was, then you already understand these two, because that is exactly what this channel lives for. I am the storyteller behind Afro-Korean collections, and every one of these stories takes real work to bring to you the right way. So if you are feeling this, tap that subscribe button. Not because I am asking you to, but because it quietly tells me this landed, that you want more nights like this one, and it is the only reason I get to keep making them. Now stay with her, because it is about to get so much worse. The venue rose up like a golden threat. She felt his hand settle at the small of her back as they climbed the staircase, warm and steady and utterly deliberate, and every guest who turned to look did the math instantly. The discarded ex-girlfriend was not crawling in alone and ashamed. She was arriving with the most dangerous man in the city, and he was touching her like she belonged to him. The ballroom doors opened, and for 1 full second the room seemed to forget the music. Heads turned. Conversations died mid-word. Naomi kept her eyes forward and her breathing even, the way he had told her, and walked into the room like it was hers. Then she found David's face in the crowd, and everything in it fell apart. David Okonma had spent months imagining this moment. In his version, Naomi came in small and alone. In his version, she watched him marry a better woman and finally understood her place. He had not imagined this. He had not imagined her draped in emerald silk with her head high. He had not imagined Lee Junho standing at her shoulder like a shadow with teeth. The champagne stopped halfway to his mouth, and for one unguarded second the whole room watched the groom go pale at his own wedding. Beside him, Grace Adele felt the change before she understood it. A bride learns her groom's face by heart in the weeks before a wedding. She knew every version of his smile, and the one on him now was not a smile at all. She followed his eyes across the room to the woman in emerald, and something cold slid down the back of Grace's beautiful gown. She did not know who Naomi was. But she knew, the way women always know, that this stranger had once mattered to the man she was about to marry. And above them all, from a quiet mezzanine, Master Ro Gwang-suk watched. He had built this evening the way he built everything, with control. Every guest was chosen. Every alliance was on display. This wedding was not about love. It was about power passing cleanly from his hands into David's. Then he saw Junho standing in his ballroom, uninvited and unbothered, with a woman on his arm, and the old man's clasped hands tightened by a fraction no one else could have seen. The jade ring turned slowly on his finger. He had not planned for this. Master Ro despised things he had not planned for. They did not stop at the edges of the room like guests were supposed to. Junho guided her forward, straight across the parquet, and the crowd parted for him the way water parts for something it fears. Naomi felt every eye. She felt David's panic and Grace's suspicion and, somewhere above, a colder attention she could not place. She had walked into this room to watch David be happy. Instead she was walking through it like a blade, and the man beside her had made her one. And then they were standing in front of him. For a moment no one spoke. David's jaw worked. His eyes flicked from Junho to Naomi and back, trying to assemble a story that made sense and failing. Junho, he finally said, and his voice was almost steady. I didn't realize you knew my guests. I know everything you have. Junho's tone was pleasant, which made it worse. Congratulations. She's beautiful. He was talking about Grace. He was not looking at Grace. He was looking at David, and every person close enough to hear understood the cut. David smiled the way a man smiles when he wants to swing and can't. Naomi, he said, tasting the name like it still belonged to him. You look well. I am well. 2 words. She let them sit there, and she did not smile back, and she watched it land harder than any speech could have. Once, that voice had run her life. Once, she had rearranged herself entirely around the fear of losing him. Standing here now, she felt the strangest thing rise in her chest. Not triumph. Something quieter. She was no longer afraid of him, and he could see it, and it was killing him. Grace arrived at his side like a woman reclaiming territory. She threaded her arm through David's, tilted her chin, and gave Naomi the kind of smile that had a blade folded inside it. I'm Grace. The bride. A pause. And you are? An old friend of the groom's, Naomi said gently. From before. Before. The single most dangerous word she could have chosen, and she chose it on purpose, and she watched it slide under Grace's perfect skin. Junho ended it before David could recover, turning Naomi away with a touch at her back, unhurried, as if the groom had already stopped mattering. They took their seats. Waiters moved. Music resumed. To the room it looked like the moment had passed. It had not passed. It had only gone underground, and everyone at the center of it could feel the ground humming. At the table, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. You did well, he said. Better than well. You frightened her without raising your voice. I didn't come here to frighten anyone. No. His eyes moved over her face, unreadable. You came here for something you still haven't told me. And before this night is over, Naomi, I'm going to know what it is. Her heart climbed into her throat. Because the thing she was hiding was not just about David. It was bigger than David. It reached all the way up to the old man watching from the balcony, and if Junho learned it here, in this room, she did not know what he would do. She held his gaze and gave him nothing, and it cost her everything. 2 years of silence. 2 years of walking past his office door with a secret folded under her tongue. She had promised herself she would finish this alone, on her terms, when the moment was right. But nothing about tonight was on her terms anymore. The moment was choosing her. Then the room shifted again, and Naomi felt it before she saw it. Master Ro Guangsuk came down the staircase like weather. Conversations lowered. Back straightened. Even the waiters seemed to move more carefully. This was the man David belonged to, the man who had turned a wedding into a coronation, and he was walking straight toward their table. If you are still here, still holding your breath with her, do me one small thing so I know you are in this with me. Drop the emoji that matches exactly how you feel right now, this second, whatever it is. And tell me where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are, because I love knowing who is up late living inside these stories with me. If you are watching on your TV, tap that like so I know you are there in the room too. Okay. Back to them, because he is about to say something he should not know. Lee Junho. The old man said the name like he was setting it on a scale. You honor us. Uninvited, but then, you have never respected an edge in your life. Master Ro. Junho did not stand. Lovely wedding. You spent a great deal to make it look like love. Something flickered in the old man's gray eyes. Then his gaze slid, slow and deliberate, to Naomi. And what he said next stopped her heart cold. And you, Ro murmured. You have your father's eyes. Her father. The room tilted. Somewhere far away the band kept playing something bright and terrible. Master Ro knew who she was. Not the quiet employee. Not David's discarded ex. He knew the one thing she had buried deepest, the reason she had walked into Junho's world in the first place, and he had just set it on the table between them like a card. Beside her, she felt Junho go very still. She did not dare look at him. Because if she looked at him now, he would see it all. Master Ro let the silence do its work, then gave a small satisfied nod and walked away, back toward the head of his beautiful evening. Junho turned to her slowly. Your father, he said, very quietly. Naomi. Who was your father? She could not answer. Her throat had closed. 2 years of control, and it was all coming apart at a wedding, in a borrowed gown, with the entire city watching. She stood up too fast, murmured something about air, and walked out of the ballroom before her legs could betray her. The corridor was cool and empty and merciful. She pressed a hand to her chest and tried to remember how to breathe. Her father. Ro had said it so casually, the way you mention the weather, the way a man mentions a thing he took from you long ago and never thought about again. She had come to finish what happened to her father. She had not expected to be recognized at the finish line. He found her before she could gather herself. Naomi. His voice was different now. The cold performance was gone. Talk to me. You'll be angry. Let me be angry. He stopped close. You've been living in my house for 2 years carrying a reason that involves that old man, and you never said a word. Whatever it is, I would rather hear it from you than watch Ro hand it to me across a dinner table. So she told him. Not all of it. But the shape of it. Her father had been a good man who did honest business, until he made the mistake of standing between Ro and something Ro wanted. He was ruined for it. Quietly, thoroughly, legally, the way powerful men ruin people. And the man Ro used to do the ruining, the smiling young lieutenant who had gotten close to her family and betrayed them from the inside, had been David. I didn't come to your organization for a job, she whispered. I came because you were the only man in this city strong enough to stand against Ro. I've been waiting 2 years for a door. Tonight David opened it himself. He was quiet for a long moment. She braced for anger, for coldness, for the door closing. Instead his jaw tightened and something moved behind his eyes that she had never seen there before, not in 2 years of watching him from a safe distance. You used me to get to him, he said. Yes. Good. His voice dropped. Then we want the same thing. But understand this, Naomi. From the second we walked in tonight, you stopped being a tool to me. So whatever happens next, you are not doing it alone anymore. The distance between them collapsed to almost nothing. His hand came up near her face, not quite touching, close enough that she could feel the warmth of it against her cheek. Her pulse was somewhere absurd, 130, and she noticed the number the way you notice you are falling. For 2 years she had built a wall around this exact feeling. It was coming down in a corridor at her enemy's wedding, and she could not make herself want to stop it. Well. David's voice cracked down the corridor like a whip. Isn't this touching? They turned. He stood at the end of the hall, still in his groom's burgundy, his composure gone, jealousy naked on his face despite the bride waiting for him 1 room away. You couldn't just let me have this night, could you, he said to Naomi, advancing. You had to bring him. You had to make it about you. I didn't make anything about me, David. You did that years ago. David lunged a step forward, and Junho simply moved. He put himself between them, unhurried, a wall of quiet certainty, and David stopped short like a man who had run into glass he could not see. For a moment the two men stood inches apart, the whole history between their factions compressed into a single breath. "Touch her," Junho said softly, "and I will end you in front of your bride, your guests, and your master. And I will enjoy the paperwork." David's fists opened and closed. He wanted to swing. Everyone in that corridor knew he wanted to swing. But he also knew exactly who Junho was, and exactly what happened to men who raised their hands to him, and so he stood there shaking with a rage he could not spend. "You have no idea what you've walked into," he hissed. "Both of you. Ro has plans for tonight you can't imagine." And then, from the far end of the corridor, a calm voice said, "He's right." Grace stood at the end of the hall in her wedding gown, having heard more than any of them realized. She was not crying. She was not screaming. She was doing something far more dangerous. She was calculating. "I've spent 6 months learning who I was marrying," she said, walking slowly toward them. "And tonight, in 20 minutes, I've learned more than in all of it. So before anyone tells me what I can't imagine, maybe someone should ask what I already know." David reached for her. "Grace, baby, this isn't. Don't." One word, and he stopped. She looked at Naomi, and something passed between the two women that neither of them expected. Not friendship. Recognition. Two people who had both been used by the same charming man. "You're the one from before," Grace said quietly. "The one he never fully explained." She glanced at David. "He talks in his sleep, you know. He said your name more than once." David's face went gray. Naomi looked at the bride, really looked, and saw past the perfect gown to the woman inside it, and understood that Grace was not her enemy. Grace was another door David had walked through and locked behind him. "He didn't tell you what he did to my family," Naomi said. "Did he tell you what he does for Ro?" Grace's chin lifted a fraction. "No. But I'm ready to hear it." And that was the moment the whole architecture of Ro's beautiful evening began, very quietly, to crack. David saw it too. He saw his bride and his victim standing shoulder to shoulder, and his enemy behind them, and he understood that the ground he had built his whole rise on was turning to water. So he did what men like David always do when they are cornered. He ran to the man who owned him. He turned and rushed back toward the ballroom, toward Ro, to warn him, to fix it, to hand the problem up the chain the way he had handed up Naomi's father years ago. Junho was already moving. "He's going to Ro," he said. "Which means Ro is about to do something loud to take back control of his own room. We get there first." Naomi walked fast at his side, Grace gathering her skirts to keep pace, and the strangest procession in the building swept toward the ceremony hall, the Mafia boss, the discarded ex, and the bride who had just chosen a side. The ceremony hall had already filled. Somewhere in the confrontation and the confessions, the hour had turned. Guests had drifted in and taken their seats beneath the great floral arch, waiting for a wedding they thought they understood. Soft music played. Candles burned. The air was thick with the perfume of 100 white roses. None of them knew that the marriage they had come to witness was already dead. It just had not stopped moving yet. David reached Ro at the front of the hall and leaned in close, whispering fast, his hands moving. The old man listened without expression. He did not look surprised. He did not look worried. He looked, if anything, mildly disappointed, the way a chess player looks at a piece that has moved poorly. When David finished, Rose simply patted his arm once, the way you calm a nervous animal, and turned to face the room. He lifted one hand, and the music stopped. "Friends," Rose said, and his voice carried to every corner without effort. "Before we begin, indulge an old man a moment of honesty." The room hushed. Naomi, entering at the back with Junho and Grace, felt every hair on her arms rise. "There is a woman here tonight," Ro continued, "who came into this city carrying an old grievance. She thinks no one remembers her family. She thinks she has hidden herself well." His pale eyes found Naomi across the entire hall. "But I remember everyone I have ever ruined." The entire hall turned as one to look at her. 200 faces. 200 strangers, and David, and Grace, and the man whose hand she could feel finding hers at the small of her back. She stood at the end of the aisle in her borrowed emerald and refused, absolutely refused, to look away from the old man who had destroyed her father. Her heart was slamming so hard she was certain the room could hear it. And then she did the one thing no one, not Ro, not David, not even Junho, expected. She started walking down the aisle. She walked the aisle of her enemy's wedding like it had been laid for her. Every step rang in the silence. Guests she would never know watched a woman in emerald walk toward the most feared man in the room with her head high and her hands steady. Behind her, she heard Junho murmur her name once, low, a warning and a blessing at the same time. She did not stop. She stopped only when she stood directly in front of Master Ro Guangsuk, close enough to see the jade ring on his hand, close enough to smell the roses and the power and the rot underneath. "You remember my father," she said, and her voice did not shake. "Good. Then you'll remember this." The old man's mouth curved, almost amused. "Child, you've walked to the front of a room full of my people to say what, exactly? That I wronged you? Everyone here has wronged someone. It's how rooms like this get built. I didn't come to accuse you." She reached into the small clutch at her side. "I came to return something." She drew out an envelope. Old. Worn soft at the corners from years of being carried and hidden and carried again. "My father kept records," she said, loud enough now for the front rows to hear. "Of every man who came to him. Of every deal, every threat, every name. He kept them because he knew that one day someone would need them. He was right." A ripple moved through the seated guests. Ro's amusement flickered, just slightly, for the first time. For the first time in the entire evening, something crossed Master Ro's face that was not control. He had spent decades making sure no evidence of his methods ever survived. Files disappeared. Witnesses forgot. And here was the daughter of a man he thought he had erased, standing at an altar he had paid for, holding a cream envelope like a lit match over a room drenched in his secrets. "Those documents are worthless," he said, but his voice had lost a fraction of its silk. "Then you won't mind if I read them aloud," Naomi said. Junho came to stand beside her at the altar, and now Ro faced not a grieving daughter but a daughter and the one man in the city with the power to make her evidence matter. "You should have stayed retired, old man," Junho said. "You reached for one more wedding, one more show of power, and you invited the whole city to watch. Whatever she reads next, they all hear it too." Ro's eyes moved from Junho to Naomi to the envelope, calculating, and for the first time the calculation did not come out in his favor. The whole room leaned in. 200 powerful people who had come for cake and champagne now sat frozen, because they had all felt the evening turn from a wedding into something else, a reckoning dressed in white roses, and not one of them wanted to be the one who looked away. Naomi unfolded the envelope's flap. Her fingers were steady. Her voice, when it came, was clear enough to reach the back row. "The first name in my father's records," she began, "is someone in this room tonight." David went white. Because David knew, better than anyone in that hall, whose name a young lieutenant's betrayal would be written next to. He knew that the second Naomi read the next line, his rise, his wedding, his careful new life, all of it would be over in front of every person who mattered. "Naomi." His voice broke. "Naomi, don't." She looked at him. For one long moment she let him feel exactly what she had felt on her knees 2 years ago. "And that is where the ground opens beneath them both, and I have to stop, because what happens in the next breath changes everything you thought you understood about that night. If you need part 2, and I think you do not just sit there with it. Get into that comment section and tell me. Comment part 2 and tell me the one thing you are certain is about to happen, because I promise you, you are not ready. The moment enough of you call for it, the next part is yours." Naomi lowered her eyes to the page. The name was right there, in her father's careful hand, waiting 2 years to be spoken aloud in exactly this room, in front of exactly these people. She opened her mouth. And the name that came out was not the one anyone was braced for. It was not David's. The gasp that went through the room was a physical thing. 200 people recoiled at once. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. David's terror curdled into confusion, then into something worse, because the name Naomi read was one that changed the shape of everything, one that meant David had never been the real betrayer at all, only the boy who was handed the knife. The name belonged to someone standing much, much closer to Master Ro, someone no one in that hall would ever have suspected. And Master Ro Guangsuk, the man who remembered everyone he had ever ruined, the man who had controlled every second of this evening, turned slowly toward the name Naomi had spoken. For the first time in 40 years, the old man looked afraid. Because the person standing there, the person her father had named, was someone Ro had trusted with everything. Naomi lowered the page. 2 years of silence had ended in a single name, and it had not been the name she came here to destroy. It was bigger. It reached higher. And it meant her war was not ending tonight. It was only truly beginning. Beside her, Junho breathed out slow, his hand closing warm and certain around hers, and she felt him understand in real time that everything he thought he knew about his own enemy had just been rewritten. The music was gone. The roses hung in the terrible quiet. And every soul in that hall stared at the one person no one had ever thought to suspect, waiting for what came next. But that is a breath we do not get to take tonight. Because the